Hey guys, Chris Clothier here, and welcome to another episode of The Grind. Hope you're doing well out there. I know I'm doing good. I'm excited to get back and start recording some more sessions. I recorded a lot of sessions before I went out of town for a few days, just a few days kind of out of the office. So it's kind of funny when you get out of the groove of doing something over and over and over again, how much you actually miss doing it. So I'm excited. I'm ready to get back in here and start recording some episodes again and connecting with you guys every Friday. I've got, this may be super premature to say, but I know I've asked my team, can we do another podcast session each week? Can we do something that's maybe a little bit longer, goes a little bit more in depth, and maybe even do some sessions where we're interviewing people? They could be other business owners. They could be other entrepreneurs. They could be just people from within the business world that have a great, story to tell, something that is impactful and adds to the Grind podcast. If that's something you guys would like, I know that we're gonna put something out where we're asking listeners, would you like, longer episodes, something a little more in depth on whether it's particular topics or even going into some interview style where we're talking with other entrepreneurs, kind of sharing our ideas but getting their input as well. So we'll have that coming to you. In the meantime, I think I've got something that's pretty good this week. I'm responding directly to a comment that was made recently on the podcast, which was, look, let me be direct. I love that. If you've got something to say, if you've got a comment, if you've got a question, hell, if you disagree with me, I'm okay with that. Bring it. Let's do it. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that my way is right. I'm right all the time. These are just my views on, 2 decades in the business. Sometimes it's all about real estate. Sometimes it's about business. Either way, if you've got a thought, share it with me. Let's talk about it. This one in particular, a gentleman left a comment, and I'm thinking he generally disagreed with me on something I said in a short Instagram reel. I think it was, maybe it's a reel or one of those little Instagram live TVs that Isabella's recording for us, where I made the comment about never buy cheap houses. And of course, he came right back with his comments. I think he disagreed with me because maybe he buys in cheap areas of the city and sells them. And right off the bat, I'm doing the one thing that I'm going to counsel everybody not to do, and I'm doing it on purpose to make the impact. The word cheap has a real problem. All right. What cheap means, and when I'm using it the way other people use it, I don't mean cheap like, the way something costs. I'm not telling you don't buy inexpensive. I'm not telling you to don't buy the house that's the cheapest one on the block. The way that whole thing came up to begin with Isabella when she wanted me to record this Instagram live was, hey, I want you to give people the tip that they need to be buying the cheapest house in the neighborhood. This idea that's how you make money. You buy low, sell high. And I told her, okay, let's film it. And we get right into it. And I said, don't buy the cheapest house in the neighborhood. And she looked at me like, what are you doing? And I kind of went into the idea that don't buy cheap because it's cheap. Don't buy something low price simply because it's low price. I really want you, if you're taking notes right now, to write this down real quick, okay? It's a thing called loss aversion. And a lot of investors out there, they will suffer from this loss aversion. And what it means is when we are more scared of losing money than we are excited to make money, we'll make decisions based on kind of this protective attitude. I'm more averse to losing than I am attracted to winning. And that is a bad area to be in. As a business person, as an entrepreneur, as an investor, no matter what it is, if you're not all in on, I know how I'm going to win, I know how I'm going to succeed, I know how I'm going to build and grow, outside of fear. Like fear is always there. The chance of loss is always there. You need to be aware of it, but don't let it dictate to you. When it does, you can make mistakes like buying decisions where you buy things because they're less expensive, and therefore, if you lose, the chances of or how much you're going to lose is going to be less. You want to lose less, so you're willing to risk less. By risking less, you buy something that provides less value because it's lower priced, it's maybe in a more challenged area, and therefore your risk is actually higher. I want to make sure that everybody really understood what I just said right there and really got the concept that the problem with cheap, if you're buying something because it's less expensive, and therefore, if it doesn't succeed, you will lose less. But in order to get something that is less expensive, you have to go to a higher risk area or make a higher risk investment. Just the nature of that alone says because it's higher risk, you run a higher likelihood of losing. So by buying cheap so you lose less, you almost guarantee that it's going to happen. You actually raise the prospect of actually losing. I tell investors all the time, if you pay a lower price for a property than other properties in the surrounding area, that's a good thing. That's where we are paying attention to the prices. We're paying attention to the values we're getting. We're trying to get to a point where I'm paying less for something of a higher value. It's difficult to do, especially passively today. Not impossible, but difficult. That is completely different than coming in and saying that I want to buy something simply because it is less. So if the average, let's say the median home price of a house in Memphis is $150,000, so I automatically want to only buy things that are under 100. To me, my perception is that's less, that's cheaper, that's less risky because I'm having to put less of my money into the deal. But the reality is that as you go into more challenged areas, as you go into areas where fewer people qualify and fewer people are looking for housing in those price points, then you actually raise the risk of losing your investment. Now, the same thing happens with businesses. The same thing happens with, and let me tell you the great way I see this happen all the time in business, just to make sure I can correlate these two things together. When you start a business and you say, well, I can start a business and I can start with X amount of capital, and I'm going to buy equipment for my business that is brand new and that it has years of life left on it, and I know exactly how it's going to perform. Or I can go with the cheaper version. I can buy used equipment that is less reliable, that has more years of service on it, that possibly is going to break in a much shorter period of time, maybe there's no warranty left, whatever it ends up being. And this can be if you're buying equipment like computer equipment. It can be if you're buying cars or vehicles or heavy machinery, whatever it is. I mean, it can be the printers to the computers to the desks and the chairs that you use in whatever business it is you're buying. If you buy used because it's cheaper, you have to understand the risk you're bringing onto yourself. Just because it costs less doesn't mean it provides greater value. It provides greater risk in almost every single scenario because just by the nature of it being used, by the nature of it being less expensive, there's a reason it's less expensive than something that's brand new. It provides less value. Now, that might be a risk worth taking as a business owner. And in many cases, it's a risk worth taking as a investor, but not always. And here's how you're going to know the difference. What are you willing to do as an entrepreneur? What are you willing to do as a real estate investor to mitigate and lower that risk? Once you've decided that I want to take on the riskier, cheaper investment, how can I mitigate and lower that risk? Well, number one, and I'm just going to talk on the investment side, as a real estate investor, the number one way to mitigate that risk is to be active and hands-on. I know a lot of investors that invest in more challenged areas of our city. I'm going to talk Memphis in general right now, and they do very well. They're very disciplined business persons. They run, they run their own management. They run their own renovations. They have their disciplines in place. They understand the challenges. They understand sometimes it's down to little nuances of how to make a less expensive property with less demand. And sometimes with residents who, they want to treat the property great. They want to have a great home, but they're challenged in other ways. Sometimes it's job insecurity, food insecurity, transportation insecurity. They're having to rent a property at a lower rate to be able to enable them to be able to save and move up. I mean, it's a fantastic success story oftentimes in these areas. But, as an investor, the reality is that you have to be hands-on. You have to be in the middle of the mud. I mean, you've got to get down in there and make sure that you're helping lift people up and be right on top of your properties. Because again, with that higher risk, it may be a higher reward. You put, less money into it, you're getting a higher reward on the back end, but it takes effort. It takes being in the middle of it, being in the know. So one of the ways that you can reduce your risk is to be an active investor. If you're going to be a passive investor in lower price points, and you're doing it because you're scared of losing, you want to get your feet started, but you want to, do it with less money out of pocket. Of course, if you just listen to me, you understand that's higher risk, but maybe you're willing to take that risk and see how it turns out. Well, you need to hire experienced management companies. You need to hire management companies who they're not just experienced at managing, but they manage in the particular areas you want to be. They manage the home that you want to own. They manage the price point. They're experts in those particular areas of a market. And every single city has areas that are a little bit more challenged. They have fewer services. Maybe they're on the up and coming side. Maybe there's just not enough money being put into these areas by the cities to be able to help them get better schools or better roads or, better, whether it's transportation services or jobs, whatever it ends up being, there's a reason that they're challenged and they need investment. So I'm not telling you not to go there, but if you're going to go there, make sure you hire great management companies that know how to work with residents that are in those scenarios, in those areas, looking to live in those areas, and they're going to help them maintain residency, stay longer. You just have to understand that there's greater risk, and that's the problem with the word cheap. Very rarely does cheap translate into profitability. Very rarely does cheap translate into a successful return. It takes great work, and you're oftentimes at greater risk. That's the misnomer and kind of the disconnect that often happens with real estate investors and sometimes with entrepreneurs and business owners is that they think they're taking the route that's going to save them money or provide less risk because they're putting less capital in, when in reality they are raising the risk of losing everything by doing that. And not by everything, I mean everything they put into that business or into that house. Just as long as we're aware of that as investors, we can make better decisions. It's called loss aversion. If you have a greater fear of losing than you do have a desire to win, you really, really, really need to consider real estate investing and which route you're going to take, because that can lead you to make decisions that are actually lead to greater risk and higher likelihood of losing. So, guys, on the next, on an upcoming, maybe not the next one, but I definitely know for sure some of the topics we're going to be talking about. I can't wait to see if we're going to launch a second episode or a second version every week. I want you guys to respond to our questioning. We're going to put out a survey to find out what you want as listeners. We're also going to be touching on, as far as in business, something that a part of my story that doesn't get told a lot. In fact, I don't know that I've ever shared it through here. The very first business I ever started, we talk about, I'm going to share a little bit about what I had to do, the very bitter pill I had to swallow in order to succeed. And it was the greatest lesson I've ever learned in business. And it's one that has served me well going forward. So I'm going to share that with you next time on the next episode of the Grind Podcast. Guys, until then, keep on grinding. We'll talk to you soon.